Okay, clap, ready? I'm going to count 3, 2, 1, and then we clap, okay? Okay, 3, 2, 1. Cheers, guys.
I think that didn't work.
We're a group of normal people with a shared passion for following Jesus. Despite this thing that unites us, we also have very different views on church, religion, life, and faith. We want to invite you into our conversations so that you too can hear new perspectives, unique ideas, and see that it's okay to be honest about your faith. Welcome to our podcast. So welcome to our first ever episode of our podcast. Dan, Steve, how you guys doing?
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, I've been keeping myself busy, etc. I went for a walk earlier, dropped some stuff off to a church member who's shielding, put some posters up in the church, and then did a little video for my own amusement, and here I am. What's new with you, Jamie? What's new with you?
So I've had a bit of I've made a big mistake today.
So I'm only laughing because I saw the mistake.
Yeah, I FaceTimed Dan and then you actually, Steve. So both of you know this. And you can see now as I move away from my microphone.
Yeah, give us a good look.
Oh gosh,
that is horrific.
Atrocious.
So it's a baby's bottom.
For the first time in about 10 years. In fact, I've never actually wet shaved to my skin before.
Ever?
That I can remember ever, right?
Really?
You're not a man.
Oh man.
I've always used like an electric razor.
No, I'm with you on that.
So
I have used a wet razor, but go on.
Yeah, so today, because I thought we're not going to be, seeing people for potentially months, I thought, what better time is it to see what I look like completely clean shaven? And the answer is atrocious. As you can see.
I think you've gained 10 years.
Yeah, I look awful.
Very strange.
Which is unfortunate when you're like 30, because that takes you right back to 20.
Yeah, I don't look good, basically. And Anna, my wife, doesn't like it particularly. The children are just laughing at me.
Has she not stroked your face yet?
I actually think she really doesn't like it. She's just trying to avoid me, I think.
Oh.
So that was my day.
Great.
Big mistake. How about you, Dan?
No mistakes of that kind of magnitude. I haven't altered my physical appearance in any way. But I did build some furniture, or at least start to build some furniture. That's, quarantine activity. Trying to find things to do with my time.
What furniture did you build?
I got some free pallets, Steve. And I'm building a garden sofa. So I can... that kind of... we've finally got some free time because the government has said you have to have some. I'm now doing all the jobs that were at the bottom of my list, like improvements to the house. But the problem is for me, is like I can't just start a job and finish it. I have to start a million jobs and leave a good proportion of them undone. And obviously, whilst I've started getting the gates ready to be painted, I thought, why not build some furniture out of pallets? So that's what I started to do. Did you see the picture, Jamie? I sent it to you.
No, I haven't.
Yes, you must have. It was on WhatsApp. Honestly, you'll be very impressed.
I'll have a look.
Yeah, please do. I'll send it to you as well, Steve.
So, first podcast.
Yeah, here we go.
Not only is this the first episode of this series, it's the first episode that we have ever recorded. None of us have ever done a podcast. None of us have ever been on a podcast, I think.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yep. Steve, you been on a podcast before?
No.
So we are winging this, to say the least. And also, as most people are, also trying to figure out how to do this kind of stuff remotely as well. So we're kind of relying on good internet connection. So bear with us, basically, as we try to kind of figure out how to get this to work properly.
I tell you what, I'm very impressed already, Jamie, with this hosting ability. I feel like you've prepared yourself.
I have. I've got notes and everything. Steve's got notes. I have.
Hang on. What? So you got notes and Steve got notes and I got nothing. Great, thanks, guys. I don't know how this is going to run.
We haven't even said who we are yet.
Okay.
So do you want to just introduce yourselves?
This is one, I always hate these things where I have to introduce myself because I don't know what to say except especially when a person starts with Steve. Could you introduce yourself? Who are you? It's like, well, you've just said I'm Steve, and I am a Christian. Became a Christian when I was a teenager. Spent 6.5 years as an evangelist, specifically as a street evangelist. And for the last 4 years, I've been studying and training to become a pastor. That is me.
When you say you're training to become a pastor, when are you?
July. I become, yes.
But you are technically a pastor now? Yes.
Yeah, so I'm working part-time for a church, and I'm an elder of that church as well. So, yeah.
Okay, cool. Dan?
I suppose I should say, first and foremost, that I am related to one of you.
Yeah.
Just set some context. So I'm JB's brother. Yeah, I'm Dan, married to my wife, Jen, obviously. I have one son. His name is Noah. He's at that wonderful age where it's conversation all the time. All the time. As for vocation / occupation, I'm a minister in northeast London, so quite a different context to where I grew up. I grew up in a small, tiny village, and now I'm thrust into the mix of urban life where everything is full of wonderful diversity and colour and energy and life. But that brings with it particular challenges. Beyond that, there's not much more to say, I suppose, other than like if you want to go into like the hobbies. But who really wants to know about my fishing hobby? I can see you're shaking your head. It's like, who wants to know about fishing? You've got some interesting hobbies. That's true. Yeah, Steve, you
guys are fishermen of men.
Oh, are we doing the Christian jokes? I thought we were avoiding that.
No.
The one who hates them most uses them most.
Well, actually, that's a nice little intro into me. The one that hates them the most. I am the odd one out here because not only am I not a pastor of a church, I don't actually go to a church at the moment. So, and we will talk about that, I guess, at some point.
Yes, we will.
Yeah, but I am a videographer, have my own videography business, bit of a wannabe entrepreneur, I guess. I've got my hands in lots of different things.
Many pies.
Make films for charities and businesses and various things. So yeah, so that is me. So
you do have family though. You could say something about.
Yeah, I do have family. I have a wife and 2 kids, 5 and 7.
7?
Did I say 7?
You did.
Did I say 7?
Yeah.
5 and 3.
Their names?
5 and 7.
Do you know why that was? It's because in my head I was
neither of their ages.
In my head I was like, there's a 2 year. There's definitely a 2 year gap between them. For some reason I went.
So you went older
instead of down.
I love that. I love that that's your logic, though. Just like there's a 2 year gap. They're 10 and 12.
Yeah. Wow, that's crazy. Yeah, so that is me.
How old's your wife, Jamie?
My wife is old enough.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. We like to keep it legal in this family.
Yeah.
This will be fun.
How are you feeling about the podcast in general?
I guess I'm more. I don't know how to put it. I'm not. This is really going well. Finding
good podcasting
words
today, guys.
Finding words. I think I am excited. I'm definitely excited. But I think there's a feeling out process in it, and just learning where each of us are. And I'm excited for the conversation more than anything else. I think it's helpful to have conversation. I think it's helpful to listen, and even if you're coming from really different places.
Yeah, and I guess that was the purpose of doing this originally. That was the kind of idea, knowing that we do have different thoughts and perspectives on stuff, to still be able to talk about it. But I remember not really being aware of other perspectives and other ideas. It was kind of like, this is the only one. Yeah. So to be able to openly talk about it and share the fact that there are different views on things, I think could be really helpful for people.
Yeah, but I would probably go one further, actually, that any hint at there being others in our upbringing was actually viewed as a negative. Like it was certainly my impression that there was a we've got it right kind of thing. Some of that was probably tied more to our family's particular personality, if there is such a thing as a familial personality. Like the conservative nature of even just how we treated village life is like, you don't leave the village. So I think there was probably something in there. So the discovery...
that does make it sound slightly like we were literally told we're not allowed to leave the village. We weren't held in the village.
No, that's true. But there was a hesitancy, wasn't there? Like, the city. Can you not remember that? I can remember that. What are you feeling? What's your hopes and dreams, darling?
Yeah, no, I'm really excited about it. I think, like I said, I wish there was something. I mean, perhaps there may have been something like this growing up. We just weren't aware of it. But I wish that there was, or at least I had access to people discussing different ideas about the things that we always assumed was one way of thinking. So I think for me, it's about that. It's about discussing stuff together, learning about things ourselves, and also letting other people in on the conversation. Yeah, for me. How about you?
Yeah, similar, I suppose. I think it's always good to get together with people that are wanting to explore things. I think robust conversation in and of itself, like Steve said, learning to listen to one another is like really important for formation of who we are as human beings. And I think if you can't listen, that's a problem. And maybe that's underneath a lot of why there's contention around different issues. That was a car outside. Maybe that's why there's so much contention, is because people haven't invested time in really learning how to listen to one another.
I also think that often conversation can be, and often is, in the Christian world, unfortunately, really unpleasant. Right. Often there's a lot of bickering, a lot of falling outs about various things. So I just wondered whether there's a part of this is about trying to model good conversations with people that might be rethinking things.
Yeah, I'm going to say something you're both probably going to disagree with, but I think while I agree with that, and I agree there's can be some really unhelpful lashback and behaviours from people in the Christian community when someone does go away from, if you want to call it mainline Christian thought. But I also think there is a duty to ministers to call out error. I think the New Testament would give a lot of affirmation about that. And I do think there is a place for that, to say someone's wrong. But if everyone is shooting bullets at each other, saying you're wrong, and no, you're just talking past each other and not actually talking about why, that's unhelpful. And I don't like it when I see people assassinating characters to get there. Yeah. And I think I see that on various sides. I don't think one Christian camp has the rights to that one.
Yeah, I agree to an extent, but often I think people are called out without actually being heard. Yeah. And often there's a lot of assumptions made about someone's point. Yeah. Which they're then called out on or made to feel, excommunicated or whatever you want to call it, without people actually taking the time to really understand or listen to what they're actually trying to say. Yeah. You know, so there's so many times I spoke to people who were like, "Oh, don't listen to that person.
Yes,
they're a heretic or whatever." And I'm like, "Well, have you actually read their book?" And they're like, "No, never read it."
Yeah.
So
I think it's a good discipline, actually. It's hard to do this when you're talking about texts and authors, but certainly in discussion, is that your listening should get you to a point where you can articulate the other person's position in a way that they're happy with. So, because often, as you say, it's built around misconception and misunderstanding, is that how many times we found ourselves in an argument where we feel misrepresented, and actually it's the misrepresentation that causes tempers and angers, to flare, because we haven't really. And I think actually there's something, like, go back to the formation thing, because for me, a large part of my own spirituality is around character formation and the idea of journey and conversation being something that forms character within us. The way it's not truth is important, obviously it's fundamental, but I think truth we tend to perceive as a final destination, like we've got there, we've arrived at this kind of fixed statement or idea that's true. And yes, I agree with that, but also there's a truthful way about how you might arrive there, because we've all met those people that are right, but they're right idiots about it, and you think there's something untrue about that way of being that isn't like living up to the character. So I think as a discipline, like being able to hear someone out to the point where you can articulate their view as well as they can, or at least until they're happy with it, then you can take it apart. But at least you've done the gracious work, I suppose. That said, I know I fall short of that standard so often, and I get irate myself, and hopefully that will happen so that people can hear on this podcast how we fix that or not.
I like that. I'll say some really. Just tell me what you disagree with, Dan, and I'll.
Oh well, hey,
I'll help.
Great, fantastic. That's good.
I'm joking. But I really like that point that you made. That so often we can claim to have the truth, to have arrived at truth, and grace is out the window.
Yeah,
and I think it's right. People can cling. I think it's a failing in Christian teachers that they can, because they're studious. They usually, and it's that truth is higher than anything else, and then actually, they've forgotten about having a truthful or a faithful character. That honours that truth. And that represents that truth in the best light possible.
Yeah, I agree.
One of the things that's happening at the moment that's obviously impacting almost everybody is the coronavirus. We're now about 4 weeks into a lockdown where, for the first time, certainly in our lifetimes, people are not actually allowed to gather together. Obviously, this is going to have a huge impact for lots of groups, but for the church in particular, this has created a very unique set of challenges, as well as the potential for new opportunities. Okay, one of the things I think would be really interesting to talk about is how the coronavirus is impacting on our work. For me, I'm screwed, basically. I've got no work on at all. Everything's been cancelled. Do you know what? Today I had something cancelled on me in August.
In August?
In August.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. Because
they can't plan for it.
No, it was a big music festival.
Yeah, but they can't advertise.
And they've cancelled it. They've just cancelled it.
Yeah. I imagine a load of contractors are going to go out of business.
August seems a long way away. But anyway, that's me. But you guys, your work is affected in a very different way.
Yeah, but hang on, tell us a bit more about yours, because that's interesting in that you're recording largely like gigs, events, promotional videos.
Yeah, a lot of my
social gatherings.
A lot of my stuff is event based. And my last last project was in that I filmed was the beginning of March, I think, and then everything else has just been cancelled.
So how are you dealing? Well, I suppose there are two questions. How are you dealing with that personally? Because that must put a lot of stress and strain on family life. And then secondly, as you're chatting to people, what's the feel? Like, how are people responding to this in that industry?
Well,
because I'm a million miles away from that, right?
Well, for me, it's there's a lot more people in more difficult situations than I am, because I mean, thankfully, the 3 or 4 months leading up to the lockdown was really pretty good for me. I had lots of projects on that I'd probably the busiest I've ever been. So financially, we're okay for a little bit. Obviously, depending on how long this goes on for.
Wow.
So
it's crazy.
Yeah, it's mad.
I believe the word of the hour is unprecedented.
Yeah. So,
I mean, that word has got an unprecedented amount of airtime.
It really
it?
has.
Yeah.
I'll never want to hear that word again.
Well, yeah. I mean, the difficulty is people just don't know how long this is going to last for, do they? I think that's the thing.
No.
In a way, if someone just said, right, just be prepared for this whole thing to be shut down till September, at least in a way, people could kind of have a plan of some sort. But people just don't know whether they're in work in 2 weeks' time or so. And then obviously the other added element of that is we've got the two kids at home, so we're trying to both
part-time teacher
do our work and teach them and look after them all at the same time. So that's interesting. Anyway, you guys, the way that the lockdown is affecting you is going to be very different to me. How are you doing it with church? I guess this might be a good time to kind of explain a bit about how your church operate anyway. Like, what's your kind of normal way of doing church?
Yeah, go for it, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, I think we would be very word-centered, I think is the best way of describing it. So the main services are Sunday, meeting together, sermon, and then throughout the week would be meeting in different settings. We have a couple of prayer meetings through the week. We encourage members to meet in different ways. We have kids programs, parent toddler group. It's not unlike many churches, I don't think. Is that enough of what you wanted? I find the question difficult because I don't like the phrase "do church." I can't stand it. So, because
why? Go on. Why don't you like that?
Because we are church. We're not doing anything. It almost makes church a verb, and we're churching. And I think it comes from a little bit of a chapel mentality without realizing it's a chapel mentality. That we do church, we're part of this club, we attend together, and it's just the attendance that's important. And I think attendance is very important, if I'm honest, about church. And we can get into that if you like. But I think it's more than that. I think it's whatchamacallit? Yeah, we are church, not we do church for us. But I understand the question. I'm being pedantic.
Yeah.
That's fine. I'm just trying to figure out the difference between how you're, what word shall I use then, operating now and compared to what you were doing before.
We've gone through a complete shift. So, yeah, I mean, I've already mentioned Northeast London, hugely diverse congregation. Our demographics as a smaller church weight towards the older age, much more of a senior demographic, and so that has huge implications pastorally in terms of caring for people and how we manage that and making sure that people are safe and supported in a very difficult time, whilst also not trying to tread like on family. So that's an interesting challenge. But then when it comes to actually maintaining a sense of continuity with worship, that's been really interesting. So we've basically gone digital, but in the full awareness that a large proportion of the congregation, as it was, are not going to be able to engage. And if I'm honest, I think it's been quite eye-opening for me around the levels of engagement with that material and whether that's representative of what we normally experience on a Sunday morning. Every pastor's looked up and seen someone falling. Well, I hope every pastor's looked up and seen someone falling asleep. Steve, have you had that?
I've fallen asleep.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Whilst preaching?
Nearly. No, I do know someone
impressive.
who.
Did they notice?
I haven't done that, but I do know someone who has.
Whilst preaching?
He was. I won't give any names away, and he doesn't go to my church at all. But someone I used to work with, he was fired. He told me no, he wasn't. He's lovely. he told me a story of how he was leading a service somewhere, and he had opened it up for prayer, and next thing he knows, no. He's waking up and wondering how long it's been since he fell asleep.
Crap! I bet that was the worst moment of his life. So, well, there you go.
So you both moved into digital. When you say that, just to be clear, you are filming yourselves, doing your same kind of sermon-y, preachy thing and putting that online?
I was waiting for the innuendo then.
What's that?
I saw you. Don't even pretend. I saw you smile.
I don't know what you're talking about.
You went filming yourselves as if it was some sort of like... Anyway. So there's been a big debate within... So again, a bit more background. So we're part of the Baptist Union as a church, and there's been a big conversation amongst our ministers around the pros and cons of doing pre-recorded services or liturgies that are fixed versus those more interactive live experiences of like Zoom or Skype or call-ins. We've decided, given our situation, to go with pre-recorded. Partly because I can become so anally retentive. Like the idea of being live on screen. Do you know
I have no idea what you just said.
You're smiling at me. Anally retentive. You never heard that? You must have heard that, surely. When you just become so...
Go on, explain it.
We just stumbled into... Well, it's just, when you just become so picky and like pedantic about yourself.
I'm so sorry. Why are you explaining this? I'm just going to have to go to the toilet. Carry on.
Hang on, is he going to edit this section out?
I don't know. Well, because he's not recording film-wise.
I've just very, very audaciously, I don't know whether I'm going to get away with this, I've just texted Jen saying, I didn't bring enough booze. Could you very quietly bring me a whiskey? I'm not sure that's... Is it sent? Yeah, it's delivered. Well, let's see whether it happens. Yeah. Jamie was saying to me that you have dipped into the analytics.
Yeah.
How have you like on your YouTube videos? How are you feeling about that?
I'm actually... Now, this is going to sound bad because I think most people are experiencing the same thing. I'm actually quite suspicious of YouTube analytics for the reason that I was watching a couple of videos myself and I watched the whole thing. And then I went back to it later and it said I'd only watched about 20 minutes of it. And I was like, well, no, I watched everything. And so that's made me suspicious of actually, do these analytics, are they actually very accurate? I think it's a fair thing to recognise that I imagine attention spans of people, and there are people who will click onto a video and then they'll click off it once they've had enough. But I am honestly suspicious of some of these analytics. And
yeah, I've got a similar feeling that's only just emerged in the past week or so, because we did a video and I had a number watch it, at least according to the analytics, and it didn't seem to be representative of the people that said thank you very much for what you did and what we, you know what I mean? Like I rang round and checked up like I do to pastoral stuff, and people made mention. I didn't ring, just to be clear for the viewer, for the listeners, I didn't ring up, did you watch it? Did you watch it?
What did you think about my sermon?
That would be anally retentive. Yeah. Give us, I need some feedback. Please be positive with it. No, but I had a listen to what people were saying, and it just didn't feel like that tallied up. So who knows? But if it is representative, I think it does paint a very sobering picture for us.
Do you also think?
Go on. Oh, you're back.
Sorry.
Hello. What are you going to do with that? Are you getting the scissors in on that?
No, I might just leave it in. To be honest, I'm trying to do this drinking lots of water thing, and it's obviously having its side effects.
Oh, I see.
So in terms of analytics and stuff,
it's not just to be clear, it's not a side effect. When
consequence.
When you drink.
Okay, consequence.
Right, there you go. Good.
Yeah. So in terms of analytics, then, do you also see that as a really? I mean, I'm a massive fan of analytics and data and stuff when it comes to viewing times and figures, because it can teach you something. Do you think that this is actually could this be a really unique opportunity for you to get data on something that you would never get data on just by people sitting there? No, I mean, is this actually reflective of what people are doing on a typical Sunday, just in their minds?
Well, that's the live question, isn't it? I mean, but that all boils down to whether analytics is accurate. So let's paint the picture, assuming that it is accurate. Our retention rate is around 60 to 70%. And our average video length is probably 11 minutes. Because I think from my experience, it's quite, I don't want to assume that I'm a world-class preacher, I don't want to be the guy that's cut his teeth in small church gatherings that then thinks he can go and be the next YouTube sensation. So I'm realistic about what I can turn out in terms of a relative scale. Like larger churches, they've cornered the market on this for years ahead of us. Our strength has always been family, fellowship, close discipleship, whereas the high production value of, say, a Hillsong, a Vineyard, and I'm not knocking them, I'm just saying that that's what they've done very, very well. And God bless them, it's reached lots of people, but that's not been our field. And so for me to then rock up and think I can do something comparative, I think would just be a strange mix of stupid and arrogant. So I'm keeping my preaching to tops of 20 minutes, that's it. So an average of around 11 minutes, but people are still clocking out. So if that is true, that's quite revelatory, I think. That would be my take. I just need to think about in what way is revelatory.
I think, yeah,
what about you,
I
Steve?
think there's a couple of dimensions to this. I think on the one hand, it is interesting, and it is an interesting question. What have we learned from this? And do the analytics point to a typical attention span of the congregation? And I think as a preacher, I want to be thinking about that all the time. Especially my background in street preaching, it was live feedback, which is very different to the church service, because you knew how well you had done and how engaging you had been by who had stopped, and had they stopped for the whole thing, or had they stopped for a minute and then walked off. And I think we might be seeing something of that in YouTube if the analytics are reflecting correctly. And so to me, that's just a reminder of what I was always battling against when I was doing street preaching, to an extent. On the other hand, I think also there's a difference between looking at a screen, particularly a replay, and engaging with something that's right in front of you. Theatre and television are very different. Theatre hasn't been outdone by TV and film because it's a totally different experience to go in and watch something live action in front of you, and getting the I don't know if you've been watching any of the YouTube shows that Thingamajiggy put out. What's his name? The real famous playwright. Lloyd Webber.
Shakespeare.
Yeah, his
Yeah. He's really made a comeback, that Shakespeare guy. It's been great for him, coronavirus. This has really worked well for him.
I've forgotten the man's name again now.
It's Andrew
Lloyd
Webber.
He's been putting his musicals on YouTube and etc. Or he's given permission for it to happen, and I think it's really interesting because I watched some of it and I was like, it's just not the same. Watching an Andrew Lloyd Webber film is not the same as watching an Andrew Lloyd Webber production, theatre production in the theatre. And I think the same is true for church, that it's, in fact, I feel it's true for myself anyway. I prefer being in the congregation, listening to the preaching. I find that much easier than sitting in front of a screen.
Well, you ride off an adrenaline, right? Like there's a certain level of kind of dynamic interaction, rapport, the stuff that builds and momentum. And I mean, we know it, like as public speakers, even aside from preaching, that moment where you've lost them, you feel that an emotional. It's like, oh, I need to alter something at this point because this isn't necessarily a content issue. This is a presentational thing, and I think the natural platform of something like a flat video is really hard to, because you haven't got that other side of it. You know, I kept saying in my intro video the other day, I was like, it's great to see you guys. I was like, that's a straight up lie. I can't see anyone. It was hilarious because it took me about 10 takes to get it. It's like, just by default, it's like, great to see you guys. Nah, damn it. It's like, no.
Yeah. I was going to ask you guys how you found the actual process of recording yourselves. Has that been a really weird thing?
Hell, I hate it. I hate it.
Why do you hate it so much?
For that same reason that Steve was saying, I think for me, there is a recognition that preaching is, as you say, there is a performative element about it. I don't want to say it's performance because that ends up in a different, but there is a performative element. And I think, you know, if you want to get spiritual about it and talk about the dynamic that's going on at that level, I think there is something of God moving in a moment that I'm not sure is exactly the same. Of course.
You can't do it online.
No, he hasn't paid for his subscription. No, I think there is something about that, and also because we've gone with the YouTube recordings, is my own perfectionism.
Yeah,
has made it a really laborious process where I just spend forever going. And it throws up all my insecurities, man. I just realise, like, oh man, I've got so much needs to happen on my character. I'm still prideful. I'm still arrogant. All of that stuff that just shows up because I can actually watch myself back. It's like, you don't see that stuff when it's just one way, but when you stop, pause and rewind, you're like, oh yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
There's the arrogance. Like the fact that I've had to do this 5 times just because I said that word wrong. And it gets to like late in the day and you're like, now screw this, I'm just going to do it straight and they can deal with it.
Yeah, and I think so I've been both on this end of it where I'm facing the camera preaching, and where I've been helping others to be set up so that they can do it, and for me, I'm exactly the same as you, Dan. I'm like, you know, you can hear it in me anyway when I'm talking normally. I am someone who gets my words the wrong way round, needs to correct myself, second guesses myself. And then when I'm on video, I'm expecting myself to be utterly smooth and perfect and silky. And it's just like, and I get frustrated when it's not. And one of the preachers I've been helping, he just came in and just does it. And he's just like, well, I only get one shot at it on a Sunday. And so I may as well just do it. And even with the imperfections, let the imperfections be there. And that really helped me. So last time I preached, which was last week for Sunday, I just preached and let the imperfections remain.
But I totally agree with you, Steve. And I think, when it comes to our people and the people that we're serving, I think there's a fundamentally different dynamic at a pastoral. I believe deeply that preaching is a pastoral event.
Yes.
Like
event.
There's an interaction.
Exactly.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, exactly. And I think because I'm speaking to people in front of me that I have some idea of how their week's gone. Like I can stand up there and say something in one way, or I can say something in another way. The content's largely the same, but the tone is tailored for the moment.
Yeah.
Because of who I have in front of me. Now, I think that dynamic dissolves somewhat when you're a larger church where actually you haven't been involved in the week of the people in front of you because it's just the sheer number of people you're ministering to. And so it's not that one's right or one's wrong, it's just different. And I think this is what I've been used to.
Sorry. Well, actually, I was going to ask you that you've both actually done, although you sound like you're very much in agreement about this, you've done this slightly differently. What? As in, Steve, you could talk more about this, but you've posted your stuff online, on Facebook, on YouTube for people to see. Dan, you haven't. You've just given a link to a hidden page on your website. I'd be interested to see why you guys have done that differently. We just said about it being quite a pastoral thing.
Yeah.
But I guess anyone can still see yours, Steve, whereas Dan's, is that the reason why you've decided to hide it from the wider world?
No, I think a large amount of the reason I've decided to hide it, thanks for that phrase, is partly because of my own confidence, I think. And just the awareness that I'm still oh gosh, this is the first episode and I'm already getting emotional. I'm living with a consciousness that, my mate Graham, although he's never going to tune in, is who I have in my mind for some reason. He's in a nursing home. He's basically blind, basically deaf, and I haven't seen him for 6 weeks now, having visited him once every week for the last 3 years, right? So that's who I have in my mind as my people, and therefore I'm not opening scripture in a deep theological, heavy exegetical manner through these videos. I'm trying to find words of encouragement, and I'm not implying that anyone else is. I'm just saying for me is that I'm trying to find words of encouragement to people. So this week I just opened up the book of Philippians and I just pulled out the whole theme around Paul's opening greeting around grace and peace. That just his words of comfort to a group of people that are in real difficult times. He himself is in isolation, in lockdown. There's a difficult dynamic going on there about how they're in contact and community. Paul's longing to see them, but he can't. There's all that stuff going on, and his opening was grace and peace to you. And that really struck me, and I felt that. Now, that's not applicable necessarily with intention, my intention, to the random visitor on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter. Do I believe that God could do something with that? Of course I do. But that's not my intention, so that's probably why I'm hesitant to do it. Maybe I just need to be a bit braver. I don't know.
I think that's really helpful. I think, that's... And I love hearing your care for the people who you are pastoring. I think that's brilliant, and don't it's not hiding it in that sense. So Jamie's loaded comment there.
Yeah. Hey, so you organised this whole thing to see if you could play me and Steve off against each other a little bit, right? And now you're...
No.
No, for us, we put it on YouTube, and I think this is one of the things where it reflects us in a couple of ways. One is we're a plurality, and so we there's 4 of us as elders. We make decisions together, and I was actually sick when this decision was made and had been taken out of the conversation, but I still would have gone with them on the YouTube thing. I'm not trying to duck that one and say, well, it was that lot. So the second, so I can't really tell you why we chose to do YouTube, except that I imagine it was available, but I don't know. I came away from my sick bed and we were doing YouTube services because the country was now in lockdown, and that was a decision that had been made. But I would have done the same, just because I don't think I would have known how to do a area on our website, etc. Having said that, I think for us as well, another way in which it shows character of our leadership is, I think my friend and colleague is not only a pastor, he's a missionary. I don't feel myself only to be a pastor, but as an evangelist. And so we're just like, well, we'll preach to and seek to apply what we're preaching to those we know in our congregation, but also we're thinking, if anyone's listening in, just as they would on the Sunday if someone came through the doors, would be preaching the gospel, and we want them to hear it. So that's so I guess it just reflects our character. I don't know how intentional it was to go, right, let's put this on YouTube, but that's just the way I think it just reflects our character. Yeah.
Can I throw the question that we were batting around back to you, the previous one? What's your experience been as a, like, I don't want to say consumer because that's frankly what I want to avoid, but as someone that's been partaking, shall we say, of media online, if you haven't, that's an interesting thing even of itself. I mean, I know you've already mentioned that you're not going to church, but the fact that you have that in your own history, and like what's the deal with that? Because you did say to me that you were checking out church services, like, and what?
Yeah, a lot of that was out of interest. So most of your views might be me.
Right. Okay. Oh, great. So the picture is a lot bleaker than I thought it was. Great. That's wonderful.
Or better, because I would have checked out for 5 minutes and then so I brought the average down for you. So people are actually watching it, honestly. No, for me, there's not been a major difference, really. I regularly kind of listen to things and watch things anyway. I have found it interesting, though, watching the way that people have done things differently. Me and Steve have already had a conversation about this, so I'll say this again. I found it very interesting that people are still deciding to do these videos in the church sometimes.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Some people are even going in the pulpit and recording it.
Right.
And there's also that on the consumer end as well. I know of people that still put on their Sunday best and sit on their living room in a suit on a Sunday morning, listening to the preach as well. Yeah. And it's interesting because I think that speaking to both of you over the last however many years, I know that there's always a bit of a I don't know if a battle is the right word, but there's always a bit of an effort to try to teach the church that the church is not about the building. Yeah. Right. That the church isn't about us all gathering together in this particular place.
Yeah.
So that's something that we've always been trying to say and always been trying to push and teach and et cetera. And yet it feels strange to me that then given the chance, to do things differently, the chance is still not taken. It's still gone to the church and to the pulpit and to do it in exactly the same way as normal.
Yeah.
And I find that interesting because I'm not sure of a better excuse to try and mix it up than a national pandemic.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I do appreciate some of the reasoning behind that. As I'm sure, Steve, you can explain from what we spoke about before. I get some of the comfort thing with people who have found this whole situation completely bizarre and scary, to have the comfort of being able to have a little bit of normality of seeing their pastor in the same place they would normally see them, giving them some sort of normality in a hectic, crazy world. I can appreciate that. But I kind of feel like it's a missed opportunity to reinforce something we've been teaching. Go on, Steve.
I would push back on it being a missed opportunity, because I guess it depends what you're then doing the rest of the time. And so if I think, and I'm afraid I've got to be limited in veiled comments on this one, I'm afraid, but I think let me not be veiled. Where our thoughts are, I'm thinking we want to pastorally think of those who are shielding, who are at home a lot, who for decades have come week after week to the church service, and who are actually also strong Christians who don't believe that building is a holy place. But then I think there are, and so what we're doing there is wanting to give them a bit of routine and normality to their week. And I think, it's a small way of being gracious, and it's a small way of trying to offer comfort. I think also there are believers who are weak in things, and they do think that they have to be at the church and a pastor has to be in the pulpit. And actually, I think the New Testament thing to do would be to actually give up our rights as a strong Christians who don't believe we have to be in the pulpit, who don't believe we have to be in the church building. I think we go, okay, at this particular time, because things are unusual, and for Christians, I think there is such danger in some of them losing faith, being offended by things more than usual. I don't know. I just think now's the time for the stronger Christian to go, okay, I'm gonna try and just I'm gonna try my very hardest not to provoke my weaker brother. And on the other hand, we're thinking about when people do come back, and we are thinking just about some things that we don't want them just coming back to the same old. And so we're thinking through life after this pandemic. Mm-hmm. So, but I shouldn't share anything else about that. But
yeah, and I wasn't. Yeah, I think because you have done things slightly differently. I know when you've done yours, Steve, you've tried to be creative in the way you've done it within the church. So it's kind of done a bit of both.
Yeah, but my purpose of
that
that hasn't just been to be different. My purpose has been that the messages I've happened to take have been more evangelistic, and so I've wanted to do something a bit different to market out to those in the church that this isn't primarily just for you. This is something different to what we're normally going to give in our ministry. But last week I was, because we're helping a smaller church as well, who haven't got the same capabilities, and so one thing we've been doing is recording sermons in their building, and I did stand in the pulpit quite happily.
Yeah, I just kind of feel that every action is teaching something. Yeah. Yes, I get what you're saying there. I get that for those people that are needing that comfort, you'd be willing to put your other views aside for them. I get that, but I also think that it's still teaching something to people that are onlooking. That is still perhaps subconsciously saying this way.
Well, I think it is teaching something. I think it's teaching something else I haven't touched on. Part of this is wanting routine, and but also we're okay. We're thinking through what we're thinking through. Our thinking in this primarily is okay. We're not just wanting people to get used to the way things are now. That
right.
Everything's online and I can stay at home and be a consumer, because that is a real problem in English evangelicalism, consumerism. And so one reason we're doing it in the building.
Is there a buzzer? Do we have a buzzer sound? Can I go? Amen. Can I throw that in?
And so one reason we're doing that in the building is because we're going, look, this is where we usually would meet. Now, I would agree, if this place, if the church building fell down tomorrow, we would still meet, but we want to encourage people, and we want people to have a desire to look, this is where we'd normally meet, because we want them to think about the gathering, because I do believe church is a gathering, and it's an assembly. And so I think that's part of our teaching when we're doing that, is we're saying we're not just going to do this in our home, because you don't normally come to my home to gather in my home. If they normally gathered in my home, that's where I'll do it. I don't know if that helps.
Good point.
No,
That's great.
I think there's some really helpful stuff there. I mean, I hear the gathering thing. I think there was a meme going around on Facebook. It's one of those things where you see the meme and you think, I could comment here, but I know I'm going to get reprimanded by a load of people and torn down for being pedantic or difficult. But I think I hear your concern, Steve, and I share a portion of it. Like, the meme was that one is the white drawing of have you seen it? It's like a normal day-to-day street, and there are people walking around and doing their shopping and pushing buggies and whatever, and there are arrows pointing to these individuals, and it says church to this individual.
Yeah.
And it's like, and I get the motivation. It's like, oh great, we've undone the doors here. People are out in the world. The church is mobilized. Wonderful.
Yeah. But
I hear the theology behind that, but actually the whole point is a calling together of a group of people that need to at least know that they're together. I think that is the difficult moment. That's the difficulty of this particular moment.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I want to hear what Jamie's saying about the opportunity, because I think there is an opportunity to reinforce the thing we've been teaching. So I don't want to say that I've been sneaky about this, because I think I've been fairly obvious, and anyone with ears, let them hear. In my phone conversations pastorally, I've been saying, isn't it interesting, Dave? And there's no one at my church called Dave, so if they're listening, that's an entirely fictional character. But isn't it interesting, Dave, that we've been preaching about how we're still the church regardless of our building?
Yeah.
Doesn't that give us the opportunity to see our building as a resource and a gift?
Yeah.
That might mean that we can use this in a different way to the way we have been using it. I think contextually appropriately for the signs and the seasons and times that we're in. And I think that's potentially the teaching point, and that needs to be done gently with who you have in front of you, because there are those believers that are just like, they're believers. I guess where I'm going with this is like, I find the whole maturity thing really frustrating, because what is often implied in Christian maturity is they've been around for a long time. It's like, no, I know believers that have been sat in that same spot, and literally the same spot, and they've told me they're proud about the fact they've sat in that same spot. They've sat in that same spot for however many years, and I think you're the one that comes and complains to me about the fact that the songs are not what you used to sing. And it's like, well, what did you expect would happen. It's like maturity is the fact that you recognize your position in the family's changing. It's like if we build this family around the grandparents rather than caring for the kids, it's like every parent knows that their responsibility is to raise their kid. But if you make your family life about you, you've lost something. And you've lost the opportunity for legacy in the future. And I think that's the opportunity I think Jamie's hinting at, is we have an opportunity to kind of change the pace, I suppose, on some of that. It's like our hand's been forced a little bit. Like we could possibly say, by virtue of the fact that we're in a pandemic, we realise that our theology actually reinforces our stability.
Yeah.
It's like if you want to hold... Yeah. Jump in.
Sorry.
Go.
No. Because I agree with all of that. I think the assumption is that, mate, Jamie, you can tell me, no, don't be such a fool. But I think
I'm going to bleep that word out, so it sounds like you just called me something really bad.
I can't believe that we've given him the keys here to edit this whole thing together.
I think the assumption is that video is the sole on a Sunday is the sole work that the pastor's doing throughout the week. And there are loads of other things that we're doing on a one-to-one level to reinforce some of this stuff. And so it's not just, oh, look, he's standing in the pulpit. That means X, Y, Z, because they know from conversations we're having, from things we're saying, even within those videos, and from things we're saying in other things like Zoom prayer meetings and stuff like that, that's just not our position.
Yeah. Your church might though, but you put it on YouTube. So
I don't.
There's a wider.
I don't think anyone who would watch it would go, "Oh, look, he's in the pulpit of his church," unless they knew the pulpit of that church.
No, but I hear Jamie's point, because actually, what they might say is they might not say this, but there is then a how would you say? A disengagement that this isn't culturally, and I think that's the separation that maybe is helpful to separate. It's like, is this a culturally, contextually appropriate medium for your missional point? Like if you're and I know what you've done in terms of being in and around the building and not in the pulpit for your missional evangelistic stuff, but it's like, by default, are you communicating to your church only by standing in the pulpit?
Well,
are you creating a... I don't know. I'm just asking.
Yeah.
It's like, do you know what I mean? Is that question of who's this for, and can I pick up on that visually?
I mean, this is a different topic altogether, I guess. But I think one thing that I feel quite strongly about, and have done over the years, that I've seen it where churches will do something altogether different, and then they'll go back to the same normal, and they'll do it completely different for evangelistic to reach people, because they are really worried if you do it the same way as you have done it, do you do it on a Sunday, people won't be interested. And actually I think that does a disservice to their evangelism, because people then come on the Sunday and having been reached at this thing and they've been told that the church is actually like this, and it's not like that.
It's false advertising.
So,
but why do you need to? Yeah, but why do you need to go like, we need to make? It's like, this is a bit of a silly example, but like sometimes if I've used different cameras for shooting a video, right, one camera is slightly crappy. Instead of like trying to make that better, you just make the other one, the good one, crappy, to kind of blend it. So like,
no, but then what are you doing? No, because I don't think it's the same. Because
I'm finished my example. Yeah.
All right, carry on then.
Not that I would say that the normal one is crappy. Sorry if that's what it sounded like.
You should have gone the other way around with the example. It's like sometimes you've got a really good camera, and you have to work really hard to make the crap camera look good.
So
yeah, I'm just interested.
So you've said
I'm interested in the way. Yeah, I'm interested in the way that the decision to go, instead of making the thing we do every Sunday really dynamic and interesting and different, to kind of meet the same level as the evangelical stuff.
Yeah.
We're gonna go the other way, and we're
Evangelistic.
gonna bring the evangelistic stuff down a notch so that it kind of fits with our standard way of doing
That's
things.
not what I'm saying.
That's what I'm interested in.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that, and I'm not using my church as an example here. I'm using multiple churches that I've done evangelism in as examples, where they're happy with the way their church service runs. Great. But they are utterly convinced that to get the attention of unbelievers, you have to do something completely different. And what they end up doing in practice is very often they make themselves they unintentionally, I don't want to say it, deceive, but there's no other word, because it's like, well, that then they get used to that, and they don't, and then they come in on Sunday, but the church are unwilling to change, and probably rightly so. But they haven't.
It's the seeker-sensitive model, isn't it? It's like the seeker-sensitive thing is the old terminology from like who's it? Excuse me. I'm trying to remember the Saddleback thing that came in the 80s. Bill Hybels thing. It's like you need to do what you can to attract people, and I think what became the case was that you ended up with ministries or events or programming that existed outside of your Sunday morning, but it created this. And this is maybe where we slightly differ, Steve. Is like,
that's fine.
I think there's a bit of it. There's a I think a false dichotomy between the evangelistic stuff, and I know you've got to have categories to be able to articulate it, so it might just be a semantic thing, but like I want to try and make sure that all those things are integrated, so that very phenomenon where there's a potential for false advertising doesn't ever exist, because I want people's experience, and my TOTS group, where my mums and dads and carers and nannies and whatever, they experience a kind of personality or atmosphere in the church that they will get on a Sunday morning, because those two things are integrated.
Yeah.
And what I'm and actually the learning then is not and this is the bizarre kind of like flipping of the whole thing, is that the learning is not really on the TOTS stuff, is actually to try and help the church recognize that they need to change.
Yeah.
Because it depends, and all of this comes down to like, where's your sense of, where is our sense as a church, our mission, or what's our purpose, I suppose, and trying to marry those two things together. But I get that. I mean, this is what we all need to acknowledge up front, is this is a period of time that no one saw coming in quite this way, and we're all scrabbling around trying to work out what to do in what feels like a stopgap. We feel like we're tight, we're holding ourselves over until we get back to normal, but yet some of us are starting to recognise that there are things that could get left behind, and that might be very helpful. That might actually be an opportunity, and I guess it's for us as leaders to decide what stuff might be intentionally left behind.
I'm curious to know what do you think, Dan, have been some really positives from all of this in church life for you so far, that you're seeing? Do you think there are any positives that you've kind of got from the congregation?
Yeah, I think already I'm starting to hear about people's willingness to engage with their locality, right? So if we can be, well, this is our intention, isn't it, to be straight? So let's talk honestly about this. I think the biggest challenge facing the church and people that attend church is that they don't have many friends. Right?
Yeah.
So what's happened is they've found a community, which is very well and good, but they found a community that has sustained their social life for 10, 20, 30, 40 years plus in some instances. And you say, who do you know? Who are your friends? And they point to the person on the pew next to them. And you're like, okay, that's not a bad thing. But I do wonder whether there's an issue there that presents a limited pool of people for whom the church can get to know, right?
Mm-hmm.
So actually the opportunity for one of my deacons this past few weeks has been dropping food round to the neighbour. It's like, okay, well, what more Christ-like action could you get in a moment like this?
Yeah.
Not much. And, you know, my other leaders down the road that are talking about how they organised and helped run a Easter egg hunt search thing.
Nice.
In their street. And you're like, okay, so maybe out of all of this, it is just the presence of disciples in local communities being good human beings could actually be something huge. Like, to me, that's really exciting. Like, I love it, obviously, as a pastor, when I have a conversation on the phone and someone says to me, I've been reading my Bible and I've learnt this.
Yeah.
I'm like, great, that's wonderful. I'm really, really pleased that you've been studying Scripture. But we all know as pastors, like, and ministers, that it's entirely possible to spend your entire life in Scripture and never follow the leading of the Spirit out into the world. And to me, that seems to be where the stuff of discipleship actually happens, where you put this stuff into practice. So that for me is one of those learning things that I'm like, oh, okay, so maybe we need to investigate more opportunity in the future to say being social. Eugene Peterson calls it what does he call it? The ministry of small talk.
Oh, right.
And he's like, this is a gift, you know, like, to the church, the ability to build relationships and friendships around things that aren't heavy theological conversations.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, the church are dying to be released into that with the pastor's blessing, I think. So that's something I've...
Yeah. I made a comment the other day that just thinking about, if you're going back to if you know, this will end, but when it ends, kind of, I think one thing I'd love to be seeing is not so much programs, but actually people building, as you say, being light, being salt in their own communities. And I think one thing that's really positive that I've seen is similar to yourself, Christians being really just being Christ-like in their community, but also with one another. And actually, you know, I'm talking to different people and they're telling me about so-and-so has done this and so-and-so has done that. And I'm kind of going, do you know, you're probably getting to know each other better outside of the Sunday services than you ever have. And I hope that's not actually true, but I think there is a element of truth to it.
I think it is. I think it in some ways, like, maybe if I can push back on this, is I wonder whether that should be the case, because maybe I've certainly been in this situation where I've placed so much stock in a Sunday morning because, and this is my own arrogance, is that this is my moment in front of the people, you know, my moment to instruct and teach and do my pastoral thing, right? But actually, that's an hour and a half, 2 hours in a week full of hours. Can't do the maths there, folks. So, but there's, is that really? I mean, is that really
room for fellowship?
Well, is it enough? So Jesus' whole thing is about the ethics and the way of life. So the Sermon on the Mount, right? It's like, look after, you know, bless your enemies, you know, bless those that persecute you, go the extra mile, you know, all of the ethical practice of a community that is he assumes that you're living around and in one another's lives. What we've done is extrapolated that to the point where that applies between 9:30 or whenever your service starts on a Sunday morning to the time it finishes. It's like, live the Sermon on the Mount on a Sunday morning, you'll be all right. I don't really think that's what Jesus was on about. So actually, and this is my pushback, is like, maybe that is the point in all of this that we could take and say, Sunday is the moment where we come together to analyze and evaluate our Christian life. That's not the pinnacle moment. That's like, I heard a preacher recently I heard a regional guy talking about it recently. He was like, that's like your halftime team talk.
Yeah.
Sunday's your halftime team talk, where you check in with everyone and saying, how's it going in your work, in your family, in your, I don't know. Does that sound more like what you're after, Jim, in terms of like the question about the impact of this?
Can I add one thing?
Yeah, go on, Steve.
Because I think just one thing that I missed that would have been worth saying. One thing that I think I've learned as a younger person who takes technology for granted, and also I take my freedom to be out and about and to go to anywhere I like for granted. That actually I've had a new appreciation and sympathy for and understanding for those who are housebound and can't get out. And I don't think that churches have served them very well in terms of being understanding that they cannot get to gather with God's people, which they would love to do, many of them. And that this has helped us think through how we're going to make that right.
Yeah. That's good. That's good.
That's really good.
I like that.
Okay. I feel like we need to land this at some point, because we've been talking for quite a while.
Are we going to do a debrief after this?
I mean, I was, but you just said it on the podcast, so...
Well, you can edit that.
We probably don't need to say that there.
Just say what you said again. Pause.
I feel like we need to land this plane. We didn't say it the same way. I'll make that sound more natural. So, yeah, I think that's been a pretty helpful conversation. The thing is,
I've enjoyed
all of these things we can go on for hours and hours and hours with, and like you say, there's so many elements. What I've certainly found when I've been rethinking a lot of the things that I've been processing again over the last few years is everything is so interlinked. Yeah, it's really hard to kind of have a conversation around how you do your church service without it linking to what is the church, what is the gospel, what is the Bible, what is all these things are so interlinked. So it's hard not to go down these different rabbit holes. But yeah, we'll pick up again on some of this stuff. So that's about it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
That's great.
Thank you.
Sorry I had to go to the toilet a couple of times throughout that.
That's okay.
But yeah, I'll drink less water next time.
Well, just drink the same amount just before, or at the end.
No, but I went to the toilet about 4 times before we even recorded. So I don't know what's happening to me.
UTI.
I shaved.
What?
Anyway, so we're landing this plane finally.
We're all counting on you.
Yeah.
Like Sully.
I was actually going for it is a great film. I was actually going for the airplane reference, when he comes in and he says, "We're all counting on you."
So we are working on our social media, our website, our various other things. So make sure that you do follow us on social media, which the links and stuff are going to be in the description. So thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Again. And thank you for listening to our first episode. And we'll see you, I'm going to say next week.
Great.
Cheers, guys.
See you later.
Cheers.
See you, Dan.
See you later.
That was
See
good.
you, mate.
Enjoyed
Great
that.
Conversation. Yeah, me too.
See you later.
So thank you for sticking with us till the end. We really appreciate that you're here. And like I said, we are trying to make this as helpful for you as possible. We're trying to figure this out as we go. So any feedback or any comments would be really appreciated. So thank you guys again, and we'll see you next week.